And welcome to America's Hope. I'd like to introduce my guest, Troy Miller. He is the president of NRB. You might say, what is NRB? I've heard the name before. It's actually National Religious Broadcasters, and it's an association that really represents a lot of Christian broadcasters throughout America. Troy, good of you to join us this hour. And of course, what you do as president of this incredible organization. You are actually at the helm of this organization at a time such as this, when people are coming head to head with vitriolic messaging about Christianity as well as other faiths and demeaning people rather than lifting people up. Talk to us about what you envision NRB's role in this particular time when we see so much division along faith and political lines and cultural lines.
Yeah, so thanks for having me today, Kelly. I really appreciate it. And you're right. We do have a lot of divisions today amongst faith lines and cultural lines and political lines around this country. You know, NRB has been around. We just celebrated our 80th anniversary at our last convention here in February. And we started to really protect the rights of pastors, of Christians who want to communicate in the public sector. Back in 1944, there was a group of pastors who wanted to be on radio, and there was another group that said, "No, we kind of want to control that." And NRB was formed so that Christian communicators can fairly and equally play in the public sector. And that's because today, as you said, there's a lot of adversity, a lot of marginalization going on, trying to keep Christians out of that public sector. We know what's going on the social media platforms, but also on the broadcasting platforms and even in car radios across this country. So we work up on Capitol Hill to make a fair and level playing field for Christian communicators, to make sure that our voices can be heard. But we also help out in the industry with best practices and help ministries and communicators, know how to communicate in today's world. This is as you know, this medium, this landscape is changing every day. So we have broadcasting and podcasting and streaming and all of those things going on. And NRB works really hard so our members know what's the next innovation coming down the road.
Yeah, you're right. And talk to me about what the significance of this time is, because as you know, we have so much going on as it pertains to Israel, Ukraine, politics, the election, the presidential election that's coming up, and just getting by on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, so we work with over almost 1,500 organizations across this country, from television and radio stations to television and radio program producers to podcasters, filmmakers, publishers. NRB is kind of the hub now. If you're a Christian communicator out working in the communication media space, then NRB is your association that's working on your behalf. We also have a number of churches, because churches today are also streamers, and they're communicating out in the public sector as well. So we work with and our members reach 190 million households a month.
Say that again.
Our members, through broadcasting and through their communications, they're reaching 190 million households every month.
Yeah, I wanted you to repeat that, because that is a significant number, 190 million households a month. And certainly they are listening and watching very closely, because you also have the NRB TV channel. But they're also very concerned about Israel. We're talking about the Christian community, which is extremely concerned about what's happening in Israel. And they're watching what's unfolding on our college campuses, Troy, as you know, with the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas marches that have been going on. And even in some cities throughout America, people now chanting, "Death to Israel, death to America." Within your organization, how is your organization addressing this? Because I know that while you focus on what's happening in America, you've also focused on what's happening globally. Talk to me about this particular aspect that's unfolding before our very eyes.
Well, absolutely. You know, Christian organizations, Christian ministries have always had close ties, and NRB has had very close ties with the nation of Israel over the last several decades since their reinception back in 1948. So many of our organizations run Holy Land tours. They take people over. They look at the places where the apostles were, where Jesus walked, and so there's been that historical bondage there, that closeness between the Judeo and Christian beliefs. So our organizations are very connected. And I just recently, as you know, went to Israel back in December, right after the October attacks, as a show of solidarity of where we are with the Israeli people. And Christians have really rallied behind Israel. And what's interesting, they've rallied behind Israel when their liberal friends have abandoned them. As you said, just look at the number of marches that are going across this country. And so this hostility that's going on across the campuses is it's really concerning. And there's a deeper issue here than just the whole pro-Hamas / Muslim issue. You can sort of understand that these protests will be going on in the Muslim sectors of the U.S. here, maybe in Michigan, maybe in Minnesota. But these are liberal campuses with progressive liberal leftists, of which many a times the Jewish people have been more aligned with than the Muslims are. And so it's very mind-boggling, and it's very concerning what's going on in America today.
So when you talk about this, when broadcasters are working through NRB, what kind of concerns are they expressing to you in terms of how they get through this? Because it's really a sticky wicket. You know, on the one hand, you're a Christian organization and you're espousing your support for the Jewish people in Israel, but then you're also very compassionate about the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding in Gaza as it relates to innocent Palestinian people. So how do you parse that so that people, one, are becoming more sensitive to the plight of the Israeli people and the plight of the Palestinian people, and holding on to your Christian values to care about loving your neighbor and even loving and praying for enemies?
Yeah, exactly. And there are a lot of Christian entities and organizations that are praying for the people of Palestine and praying for their safety. And as you said, you know, there's the issue here is this terrorist organization, you know, Hamas. And so a lot of Christian organizations with their ties, first of all, they're getting out the right information and the truth. Mainstream media has been telling a one-sided story what's going on in Israel, because they have labeled the left progressives have labeled Israel as this oppressor, and that's really not the case. We know who perpetrated the attack on October 7th, and Israel has a right to defend itself. And we've talked to many in the Israeli government and the IDF that are working over there, and we know they're trying their best to limit the number of casualties in the civilian population there. But when Hamas is using them as human shields, that's just hard to do. Even the Hamas leader out of Qatar just this last week said, you know, 30,000 civilians have died, and we're willing to martyr 30,000 more. And so that's a hard thing to do. So the main thing that Christian communicators are doing today is first getting out the truth, the right message. But I tell you what they're also doing. They know this war is going to come to an end. And when it comes to an end, it will be Christian relief organizations, Christian aid organizations that will be the first ready to pour into Gaza to help people. A lot of people don't know that the hospitals, you know, earlier there was a discussion about a hospital. Was it attacked by Israel, Hamas? That hospital was built, I believe, by the Southern Baptist Association with their ministry funds. And a lot of the humanitarian aid that's gone on in Gaza has been backed by Christians and Christian funds. And I know a lot of organizations, they're waiting and they're ready to go in and help the Palestinian people when the time is right and when it's safe to do so.
Troy, you hit the nail on the head, my friend. Christian organizations have been right there doing a lot of heavy lifting before all of this unfolded. And the question now that has to be asked is, well, we know that Christian organizations, out of their love and concern for all of humanity and all of God's children, are reaching out to people in an area controlled by Hamas. But here's the question. Hamas received billions of dollars to take care of Gaza and all the Palestinian regions. Why are they still living in opulence while the Palestinian people are living in dire straits? Oh, and by the way, as you alluded to earlier, being exposed as human shields.
Yeah, well, you have to remember when Hamas took over the Gaza area from the Palestinian Authority, one of the first things they did was start a deep indoctrination with the Palestinian civilians that were there and change the schools so that kids from kindergarten through fifth grade would get indoctrinated in the most radical version of Islam that there is. And so they really worked hard to control that side. And of course, they took all this money, and now we're finding out, how did they build hundreds of miles of tunnels underneath all of Gaza, and who paid for that? Well, a lot of U.S. aid, it sounds like, paid for that, and even to find out that possibly weapons that were left behind in Afghanistan have shown up in Gaza. So Hamas does not have the best interest of their civilian population at hand. They simply look at them as tools. Contrast that with those of us who have been to Israel. You go into Israel, people don't understand there's a large Muslim Islamic population that lives within Israel proper, and they live as part of the citizenry. They are treated better under Israeli governance than they are in their own areas, under their own people, and that's, I think, is what the future is going to look at. We sponsored and helped pass this resolution, this statement. It's called the Judea-Samaria Statement. It's Keep God's Land, so that Christians could understand that the areas we're talking about, in especially what's called the West Bank, you open your Bible, there is no such thing as the West Bank. This is Judea and Samaria. This is where Christ walked, Christ ministered, where the apostles were. This has been Jewish land. There's never been a time that Jewish people haven't been in the land of Israel. They're not occupiers. And until we get that messaging changed, until we really understand that, there isn't going to be a lot of hope for the peace to move forward.
So glad you brought that up, because that goes a lot further back than 1948. That goes to BC and AD. So good of you to point that out, because the world doesn't understand that, and bringing that to light is part of the narrative that has to be put out there. And of course, we're not getting that from the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas side, which is fueled and funded by Iran and Qatar and so many other countries, including Russia and China. Look, we could talk about this for a while, but there's a lot more I want to talk to you about. The bottom line is that NRB and the broadcasters within this organization are putting out the truth and letting people know about their activities in Israel, in Gaza, and the fact that when this war ends, like you stated, they will be right there front and center to help rebuild. Let's take a break. When we come back, Troy, I want to talk to you about, this wonderful thing called politics in America. That's next. Welcome back to America's Hope. So I've got Troy Miller here with us, and he's the president of NRB, the National Religious Broadcasters Association. And Troy, you represent an organization that has been around in this country for some 80 years, always shining a light in darkness and elevating hope in the midst of despair. And showing love at a time when people have a problem in hating each other based on politics, based on faith. And you still try to the organization still tries to broker peace, love, and freedom. So I wanted to ask you, we're in politics right now. We're coming, of course, to the wonderful presidential election that's going on. And no one's divided, right?
Yeah, that would be wonderful if that was the case. Unfortunately, in politics today, I'm not sure that the country's been more divided, and that the two major political parties have moved farther apart than they are right now.
What happened to, we can all find disagreement, but we can still find common ground for the common good of God and country?
Yeah, it's a good question. So here's the issue that's been growing in the country, and that's this polarization of we're right, you're wrong. You said there was a time in the country where we could sit down and have really healthy debates about issues and come up with bipartisan solutions to problems. Or, as I said, we could disagree on politics and still play softball together throughout a whole season. That unfortunately has really kind of drifted away, and a lot. And look, a lot of this has been blamed on the right, where they talk about, well, the right does this and that. But if you really look at the rise of the radical left, I think has really caused the deep polarization in this country. This was a group that when we first started to look at this, and when I first started to look at this 30 years ago and look at what was going on in politics, there was, as you said, there was this healthy debate that could go on between the right and the left. Now the left, since the left has grown in power across this country, particularly across the academic, entertainment, and media sectors of this country. This is the party that was supposed to be the party of tolerance. That was preached by the left for years. It was preached what we need. The right needs to be more tolerant. The right needs to be more tolerant. Now that the left controls these major mediums in media and entertainment, all of a sudden it's the left that is now saying, no, we need to silence. We need to not let the right speak. The real thing issue is here it is this quote unquote stop the disinformation, stop the hate speech that's going on. And look, from my aspect, from what we see going on, that's all coming from the left. It's not coming from the right, and it's certainly not coming from the Donald Trump presidency or candidacy. I think we've seen the weaponization of government under this administration more than the history of this entire country. And that's frightening for the future of politics and the future of the country as a whole.
Wow. So moving from politics now, you mentioned Hollywood several times during our discussion. As you know, Hollywood, we did when I say we, Epoch Times and NTD News, we did a documentary about the Hollywood takeover by China. Do you think that China has had a lot of influence, more influence than it should have in the development of movies out of Hollywood and programming?
Oh, absolutely. I think you guys have done a great job at NTD and at Epoch Times of exposing this, and it's a great documentary. If you haven't seen it yet, the influence that Hollywood, that China has had on Hollywood in movies, but also even in television broadcasting and in media. The Chinese are just quietly subverting the American way that's going on. Even we go back to even the protest on the campuses and the influence that they've had across the major educational institutions. And that's something that the government is going to need to address because China is not our friend. They're not out to help the world. They're out to conquer the world and to bring communism to play in America. And if they can get America out of the way, then right now the world's theirs.
And part of that is the entertainment and the cultural strength that they can gain by wielding in their influence. So what does NRB do in terms of the filmmaking that goes on with Christian filmmaking, as well as partnerships that you've had, even with Epoch Times and other organizations that want to push forward a more positive, thought-provoking narrative that says we must stand together, a nation united will stand, as opposed to a nation divided?
Yeah, and first of all, we have some wonderful counter documentaries coming out of Christian filmmakers today, and coming out of organizations like Epoch Times that are telling the real story of the American way, and they're also exposing the real story of what's going on with communism. There was a great documentary that came out just a while back that exposed all of the persecution that has gone on in China of Christians and evangelicals that are simply trying to share the gospel there. And that's where Christian communicators really play a role, in Christian filmmakers, to talk about and to counter these messages that are coming out of China, that China's using through Hollywood to make communism, to make this socialism look like this is the solution, to romanticize it, that this is going to solve the ills of America. And we have to keep telling that faith story, that those foundational beliefs that we get through the Bible, through Scripture, those things that Christianity pushed for, the idea of the freedom of conscience, the idea that the right that we have to own property, the right that we have to pursue life, liberty, and happiness in this country. And if we don't tell that, the mainstream media is not going to tell it, and Hollywood certainly isn't telling it today, because they're enslaved to the dollars, as you said, that's coming out of China.
Yeah, Troy, look, why did you get involved in NRB?
Oh, well, a number of reasons. First of all, this is a door that God opened up and really put me into. I wasn't looking for this position, but I say that God always knows best for what's best for you than you know for yourself. But it's important for us as communicators, and it's important for the Christian communicator. I've ran NRB TV for 18 years, and it's important for us to be able to communicate it fairly and equally in the public space. And it's really the hope and the message of the gospel that's going to change people. We can go through all the politics we want. We can try to push as many laws through we want. But people today are understanding that there's really a lot of despair in this world. There's no hope. And the message of the gospel brings that hope, the hope that God so loved the world that he gave his one and only begotten son. That's the hope that changes people's lives. That's the hope that helps the addicts. That's the hope that helps people who are on the verge of suicide, whose lives have fallen apart. It's that hope of the gospel. And that's really what's important. We work hard so that the ministries that God has called out there that are part of NRB, they can do what God's called them to do, whether it's humanitarian aid, whether it's social issues, or whether it's just straight preaching, teaching, theological things. Our point is they deserve a right to be in the public square. And there's a lot of opposition to that today.
Hey, Troy, you just answered my final question, and that is, what is your hope for America? You've actually answered that. I appreciate you. Yeah, I really do. And I mean, keep shining the light in darkness and lifting that hope up and that banner of love. I appreciate you and NRB and the support that you've been giving to all Americans and even people around the world. Thank you, Troy Miller.
Well, thank you for having me and for all the work you guys do there.